What if you could guarantee a massive deal before the procurement team even knows there's a project?
Right. It sounds totally impossible.
It does.
Yeah.
Sit with that for a second. Because if you are a sales leader or a hiring manager or, an executive listening to this, you know the absolute scramble that happens when a major tender hits the market.
Oh, yeah. It's a bloodbath.
Exactly. You're fighting on price, you're fighting on timelines, you're up against like 3 other competitors who look exactly like you on paper.
Yeah, but what if the game was already won before the starting gun even fired?
That's the dream, right?
It is, and it feels like an impossible scenario for companies trapped in these reactive cycles, but it's actually a highly structured methodology.
Right.
And it completely upends how most organizations think about the fundamental concept of sales success.
Because we spend so much energy, like institutional energy, obsessing over the finish line, right?
Yeah, the contract signature, the purchase order.
Right. And we completely ignore the starting line, which is why today's deep dive is zeroing in on a piece by Nathan Davis.
Yeah, the role of a specification sales manager, where sales starts before the sale.
That's the one. The mission for our conversation today is to really pull apart the nuts and bolts of this. We want to understand how true sales success in technical, built environment sectors relies on influencing the buying criteria way upstream.
Way upstream, long before a single dollar or euro changes hands.
Exactly.
And this shift from reactive selling, just waiting for an RFP to drop into your inbox to proactive shaping, well, that is the ultimate competitive advantage.
For sure.
So we're going to break down what this role actually does on a day-to-day basis, the commercial leverage it creates, and the very common hiring traps that companies fall into when they try to scale these teams.
And to even begin understanding how to hire for this role, we really have to tear down our preconceived notions of where a sale actually happens.
Right, because we get so anchored to the transaction.
Yes. In most industries, we assume sales happen at the point of purchase. Yeah. You put the item in the cart, you sign the SaaS contract, swipe the card.
Yeah.
But in complex technical industries, assuming the point of purchase is the point of decision is, it's incredibly dangerous.
Oh, it's a fatal assumption. I mean, if we break down the fundamental difference between traditional sales and specification sales, it really comes down to geography.
Geography.
Like where you are.
Exactly. Specifically, where on the timeline you're standing.
Oh, okay. Timeline geography.
Right. Traditional sales focuses relentlessly on the end buyer at the exact moment of transaction. You are targeting purchasing managers, procurement officers, basically the people holding the corporate checkbook.
Right, the money people.
Exactly. But specification sales operates in an entirely different time zone. They operate years before the checkbook even comes out.
Let's anchor this in reality for the listener. Imagine we're talking about, say, the HVAC system for a massive new commercial skyscraper being built in Dubai.
Yeah, good example. A traditional salesperson is waiting for the building to be framed, right? Waiting for the general contractor to put out a bid for air conditioning units and then, submitting a price.
Which is just a race to the bottom, because by that point, the contractor just wants the cheapest boxes that meet the minimum legal requirement.
Right. But the specification sales manager isn't waiting for the bid.
No, not at all.
They're sitting down with the structural architects and the mechanical engineers like 3 years before they even break ground on the tower.
Exactly. They are the ones defining what products or solutions are actually going to be required to make the building function optimally in the first place.
And their ultimate objective in those early meetings isn't to ask for a purchase order, right?
I mean, they couldn't even if they wanted to. The building literally doesn't exist yet.
Right, it's just dirt.
Exactly. Their goal is to ensure that their specific product, like their proprietary airflow technology, is actually designed into the project's specification itself.
Long before any tenders or requests for proposals are drafted, let alone issued to the wider market.
You've got it.
So it sounds like you're convincing the chef to write your specific brand of flour into the restaurant's recipe itself, rather than trying to pitch your flour to the restaurant's accountant weeks later when they're just looking for the cheapest bulk ingredient.
Oh, that analogy hits the nail on the head. Because if the recipe explicitly calls for your flour, because of its exact protein content, its hydration rate, its milling process.
The accountant doesn't have a choice.
Exactly. The decision has been fundamentally shaped by the culinary requirements, not the budget spreadsheet. The accountant just executes the purchase.
I do want to push back here, though.
Sure, go for it.
Because if I'm a VP of sales, right, I'm looking at my CRM dashboard, I'm looking at quarterly revenue. If these specification sales managers aren't talking to the people who hold the purse strings, and they aren't actually securing purchase orders, how on earth does a sales leader look at their dashboard and know if this person is doing their job?
It's a great question.
Isn't this just like a glorified technical support position? Or high-end PR?
See, that is the exact dilemma that trips up so many executives. It is absolutely sales, but the currency being traded in those early days is influence, not immediate revenue.
Influence.
Yeah, you have to understand the causality here. Success in this environment requires tracking projects from the initial concept phase all the way through to completion.
Which takes a long time.
Years. Sometimes it is a highly non-linear sales cycle. You're doing the heavy lifting early so that the revenue becomes an inevitability later.
So it's about maintaining that specification.
Yeah.
You get written into the recipe, but then you have to make sure no one swaps you out for generic flour when it finally does go to procurement.
Yes. That is the crucial second half of the job. You are guiding decisions through multiple stakeholders over months, sometimes years.
Right.
Because if a specification manager just acted as PR, they would walk away after the lunch and learn presentation.
Job done, yeah.
Right. But a true specification sales professional stays attached to the project. They ensure that the technical integrity of why they were specified in the first place is defended against cost-cutting measures down the line.
So it is a rigorous, persistent sales effort. It just happens to take place in a totally different theater of operations.
Precisely.
Which means we need to completely redefine our metrics for success. If you're a leader building this team, you can't manage them with a traditional SaaS dashboard that tracks, calls made and deals closed this week.
No, you have to measure success by specifications secured.
Specifications secured.
Because if you judge them on immediate revenue, they look like they're failing. Even on the exact day they lock in a multi-million-dollar architectural project that won't actually pay out for 18 months.
Wow. Let's talk about the mechanism of securing those specifications then.
Yeah.
The reading points heavily to technical education, specifically delivering CPDs, continuing professional development sessions.
Yeah, that's their primary tool.
But what does that actually look like in the room? How does a presentation turn into a secured spec?
It works because it is entirely devoid of a traditional pitch.
Really? No pitch at all?
Nope. When a spec manager stands in front of a room of mechanical engineers, they aren't pushing a product catalog. They're solving complex design problems.
Okay, let's go back to that skyscraper in Dubai.
Sure. The spec manager might deliver a deeply technical CPD on the thermal dynamics of cooling a 50-story glass building in a desert climate.
Right, very specific.
They present objective, peer-reviewed data. They position their specific airflow technology as the objectively superior option based entirely on technical merit, not price or slick marketing.
So they're essentially acting as an unpaid consultant for the design firm.
They are. And by providing that immense value up front, they build a layer of trust that a traditional transactional salesperson can never, ever touch.
Which brings us to the commercial leverage this creates for the business.
Oh, it's massive.
Because when you look at the companies actually winning in this space, you see a massive shift in power dynamics. When you secure demand before your competitors are even aware that an opportunity exists, you completely change the rules of engagement.
You change the rules, and you eliminate the single most painful part of the traditional sales cycle, which is the race to the bottom on price.
Right. Because if your product is already explicitly specified by the architect, if the exact model number of your HVAC unit is baked into the official blueprints, the price pressure evaporates.
Exactly.
The procurement team can't just swap you for a cheap knockoff without violating the engineering requirements and, frankly, taking on massive liability.
Nobody wants that liability.
Right. You're not fighting to get your foot in the door at the tender stage. You built the door.
And you built the frame and the hinges. You own the entire context of the purchase.
That's huge.
When executed effectively, this shifts the entire business posture. You aren't reacting to the weather. You're generating your own weather system.
Yeah.
You drastically increase your win rates when the project finally reaches the purchasing stage because, well, the decision was actually made 2 years ago.
So it sounds like a traditional closer relies on creating urgency. Like, sign by Friday for a discount.
Right. The classic push.
But a specification manager relies on creating certainty. If a closer tries to rush a structural engineer, They just look reckless.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Urgency versus certainty.
Right.
Engineers and architects are entirely risk-averse by nature.
I mean, they have to be.
Exactly. Their licenses and sometimes people's lives depend on their designs working flawlessly. They do not want to be closed. They want to be educated.
They want absolute certainty that your product will not fail.
Right. But certainty takes a really long time to build.
Which leads me to think about the day-to-day reality of this role. We are talking about this someone who has to convince an engineer, who then has to convince a project manager, who then fights with procurement.
Yeah, lots of hurdles.
They are constantly operating through indirect influence.
And that indirect influence is the hardest skill to master. Let's say a project manager is actively trying to slash the building's budget by $2 million.
Right.
The specification manager isn't allowed in that budget meeting.
Right. They're not invited.
So they have to equip the structural engineer with enough technical ammunition and conviction to go to bat for their product against the project manager.
Wow.
They have to make the engineer believe that cutting this specific HVAC system compromises the entire building.
That requires an incredibly high level of commercial intelligence. You aren't just teaching an engineer about thermodynamics, you are teaching an engineer how to negotiate with their own boss.
Which perfectly bridges into the biggest pitfall for executives and hiring managers. It is the single most common failure point, bringing the wrong type of sales talent into a specification role.
Let's dig into that hiring trap. Because if you get this wrong, you don't just lose a few months of base salary. You lose your entire upstream advantage, and you burn relationships with key industry influencers.
Absolutely. The mistake happens because a business will look at their roster or they'll look at a candidate's resume and say, wow, this person was the top performing transactional closer at their last SaaS company.
They smash their quota every quarter.
They are a killer. Let's put them on the specification team.
It's like hiring a brilliant trial lawyer to write a complex piece of legislation.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
The trial lawyer is incredible at standing in front of a jury at the very end of the process, creating urgency and arguing the case. But they would be absolutely terrible at the quiet, painstaking, multi-year work of drafting the policy, building coalitions, and negotiating the fine print in the first place.
The skill sets are entirely divorced from one another. The issue is not a lack of raw capability. The trial lawyer is smart. The SaaS closer is highly capable.
Right, they're good at what they do.
The issue is a fundamental lack of alignment between the role's requirements, patience, technical depth, creating certainty over years, and the individual's psychological profile.
So what happens when that SaaS closer gets put in front of the design engineers?
Total misalignment. I mean, they lack the ability to operate in a consultative environment. They get impatient. They start asking for the business on the second meeting.
Exactly.
And the engineers immediately sense that this person doesn't actually care about the integrity of the building. They just care about their quarterly commission check.
So the trust evaporates instantly.
Instantly. And they get zero traction.
Which means as a hiring manager, you can't just go off a gut feeling that someone seems patient during an interview. You need a structural solution to evaluate this very specific breed of consultative talent.
You absolutely cannot wing this kind of hiring. This is where specialized frameworks become invaluable. The literature points specifically to the methodology used by the sales experts.
Right, like the frameworks mentioned.
Yeah, frameworks like the 5-stage sales team scaling system and the Sales Hunter Intelligence Evaluation.
Now, I always get a little skeptical of proprietary evaluation names. How do those actually work in practice? Are they just glorified personality tests where the candidate checks boxes saying they are detail-oriented?
Far from it. A true evaluation doesn't test self-perception. It tests mechanism and behavior. Instead of a standard interview question like, tell me about a time you had a long sales cycle, these evaluations use intense behavioral simulations.
Oh, interesting. What does a simulation look like for a specification role?
Well, they might hand the candidate a highly technical, really dense specification sheet for a new piece of industrial equipment.
Okay.
They give them 20 minutes to review it and then ask them to translate that spec sheet into a 5-minute educational pitch designed for a non-technical project manager.
So a test translation, not just memorization.
Exactly.
Can you absorb complex engineering data and turn it into a compelling narrative of certainty for someone who doesn't have an engineering degree?
You hit the nail on the head. It assesses their specific approach to stakeholder education. It evaluates whether they actually have the capacity to maintain persistence, across long timelines and navigate that indirect authority we talked about.
That makes total sense.
The frameworks force hiring managers to base their decisions on the candidate's actual capacity to execute a consultative methodology, not just their historical ability to aggressively close a quick deal.
Because in specification sales, the how is everything. If you just look at a resume to see if they hit, 120% of their quota last year, you're completely blind to the mechanics of how they did it.
Yeah.
And if you do it through discounting and high-pressure tactics, they will destroy your specification pipeline.
Which is why having a structured hiring system is just as important as having a structured sales system. You need absolute alignment.
So let's pull all of these threads together for the listener. We started by completely redefining where the sale actually happens in complex industries.
Right, moving away from the final transaction.
Exactly. And shifting years upstream to the architects and engineers who write the rules of the project.
And we explored the mechanism of that influence using technical credibility and objective education rather than slick closing tactics to create certainty and secure those specifications.
And we looked at the massive commercial leverage that creates. By doing the heavy lifting upstream, you secure demand in the dark.
Yeah, before anyone else knows.
You eliminate the race to the bottom on price because you literally become the blueprint.
But, and this is the big but, the entire engine falls apart if you fall into the hiring trap.
Right.
You cannot put a transactional closer into a consultative multi-year role. You need behavioral simulations and structural frameworks to ensure the talent matches the timeline.
Absolutely. So if you're an executive or a hiring manager looking to secure the top 1% of sales talent before you even commit to a search, you really need to understand these frameworks.
It's vital.
We'd encourage you to check out thesalesexperts.com. It's a great resource to learn how to define that perfect success profile for your organization without relying on trial and error. Because getting back to where we started, wouldn't you rather guarantee the win before the procurement team even knows the game has begun?
It truly is the ultimate competitive advantage. But, it leaves me thinking about where this industry is heading next.
Where do you think?
Well, we've talked so much about the human element, right? The absolute necessity of a specification manager building deep consultative trust with an engineer over years.
Right.
But as AI and generative design software get better and better at automatically writing technical specifications and optimizing building materials based on raw data,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
will this role become less about translating engineering specs and entirely about human relationships? I mean, when the AI can mathematically prove your product is better, does the specification manager's job become purely about navigating the internal politics of the design firm?
That is a fascinating dilemma. Because if the software builds the certainty, the human just has to build the coalition.
Exactly.
That changes the hiring profile all over again. Lots to think about there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.